I'm Laura Trevelyan, live in New York City, where the US is remembering 20 years to the day since the 9/11 attacks on American landmarks. At a ceremony held here at Ground Zero, victims of the attack on the Twin Towers were remembered by their loved ones.
20 years feels like an eternity, but yet it still feels like yesterday. Until we meet again, my love, rest in peace.
6 moments of silence have been held, marking the times each of the 4 hijacked planes crashed and when the World Trade Center buildings collapsed on that day in 2001. Former Presidents Clinton and Obama joined Joe Biden in New York as George W. Bush spoke in Pennsylvania, calling for people to come together.
So much of our politics has become a naked appeal to anger, fear, and resentment. That leaves us worried about our nation and our future together.
You're watching special coverage of the anniversary of September the 11th. Events commemorating 20 years since the 9/11 attacks have been taking place here in the US. The ceremony in New York included a minute's silence at the exact time the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center in 2001. And the names of the nearly 3,000 people who were killed that day were read out. President Biden is traveling to all 3 attack sites, New York, Pennsylvania, and the Pentagon in Virginia. With more on the day's events is our North America editor, John Sopel.
On this stunning, clear September morning, they gathered in solemnity and sadness in Lower Manhattan.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
The weather identical to that fateful Tuesday morning 20 years ago. But everything else was different. At 8:46 this morning, the tolling of a bell. The moment the first plane struck the Twin Towers. And the bells rang out at the Pentagon and Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the other sites of the 9/11 terrorist attacks.
Gordon M. Amos Jr., Edelmiro Abad.
And then the haunting, harrowing recitation of the names of those who died.
Ronald Philip Caloper, and my husband, Joseph Rena Jr.,
and my uncle, James Francis Quinn.
With the readers pausing to pay tribute to their loved ones.
Continue to watch over us and your family. 20 years feels like an eternity, but yet it still feels like yesterday. Until we meet again, my love, rest in peace.
The president, who is visiting all the 9/11 sites today, released this message.
We find strength in its broken places, as Hemingway wrote. We find light in the darkness. We find purpose to repair, renew, and rebuild. And as my friend told me that September 20 years ago, we must not be afraid.
And George W. Bush, who was president in 2001, contrasted America today with America then.
So much of our politics has become a naked appeal to anger, fear, and resentment. On America's day of trial and grief, I saw millions of people instinctively grab for a neighbor's hand and rally to the cause of one another. That is the America I know.
But today belongs to the people whose lives were rent by these unfathomable acts.
I was sleeping when the first tower hit, and my mom woke me up because my dad worked there. So he was a victim, and I saw the second plane hit. I just hopped in my car. I was here the next morning. So, excuse me.
You can't ever explain this horrible stuff, you know, and you relive it every year. But I mean, I think for the families, it's worse.
On anniversaries, America can feel a kinder, less harsh place to be. But though the United States may still be united in grief and sorrow by the events of 9/11, it's not united by much else. John Sopel, BBC News, New York.
Good evening. 20 years ago today, amid scenes of almost unimaginable horror, close to 3,000 people died during the September the 11th terror attacks. 2 planes crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York. Another struck the Pentagon, and the 4th crashed in a field in Pennsylvania when passengers fought back. Today, all those who perished were remembered in sombre memorial services across America and also here in the UK. 67 of the victims were British. The Queen said her thoughts and prayers were with the victims, the survivors, and all the families who've been affected. From New York, our US correspondent, Emma Murphy, reports.
Under a sky as cloudless as 20 years ago, to the strains of the drums and pipes, America remembered. Those for whom today means more than a day in global history held aloft the images of those who they loved in life and love now in loss.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light?
The land of the free, pausing to remember the freedoms attacked at 8:46 when the first plane hit the World Trade Center. The political elite of then and now led this nation in its grief. But this was not a day for them.
Saria Rachel Emma Clark.
Neil James Cudmore. And my brother, Vladimir Savinkin. Vladik, we all love and miss you so much. 20 years feels like an eternity, but yet it still feels like yesterday. Until we meet again, my love, rest in peace.
I know you're with us every day watching over us, and even though I never met you in person, I still miss you a lot.
At 9:03, a second toll of the bell marked the moment the second plane hit the South Tower. At 9:37, in New York and in Washington, D.C., silence for the moment the third plane hit the Pentagon.
Amazing grace.
Sergeant First Class Jose O. Calderon Olmedo, United States Army.
The flag of the nation unfurled in honor of all of those who lost their lives as the nation came under attack as never before. At 9:59, a fourth toll marked the moment the South Tower fell. 4 minutes later, in New York and Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where Flight 93 was downed, words from the man who was Commander-in-Chief that day.
The world was loud with carnage and sirens, and then quiet with missing voices that would never be heard again. These lives remain precious to our country and infinitely precious to many of you.
At 10:28, the toll of the bell was for the moment the North Tower fell.
Erwin L. Erker.
William John Irwin.
The world won't hear these names every day, but they are etched in history and in the hearts of those who will mourn long after the ceremonies end.
God bless America.
Emma Murphy reporting from New York. While there were similar scenes here too, as the 67 Britons who died were also remembered. The Queen led the tributes with a message that her thoughts and prayers were with the victims, the survivors and all the families who've been affected. Carl Dinnan has more.
For so many 9/11 families, there is no grave, no headstone, just a name on a plaque. For the families of the British victims, that plaque is in Grosvenor Square in London. Godwin Ford was a security guard in the South Tower. His daughter had just joined him in New York, and after years apart, his son was just about to.
Just to be reunited with him after a long period of time, you can only be ecstatic about it.
You must have had a lot of plans for your own life that have been taken away from you by this.
Yeah, I was angry for a long time. Still to this day it hurts.
So every anniversary is hard.
You can't prepare for it, you just kind of deal with it how you deal with it on that particular year, and however much it kind of decides to hurt more or less or the same.
At the Olympic Park there is another memorial, one of the few pieces of the World Trade Center to have been sent overseas. Here there was a service for those who made it out.
And if I can be really indulgent, can I please ask that you spare a thought for all the survivors? Because we're still struggling.
And more families of those who did not. Michael Egan from Hull had been in the South Tower.
My mother was able to receive a call from my dad that day, and he called her and said, "I'm not making it out. Kiss the boys. I love you. We've tried to get to the roof, but we can't." And shortly after, my mom was on the phone. While she was on the phone with him, the building collapsed.
The Queen sent a message saying, "My thoughts and prayers and those of my family and the entire nation remain with the victims, survivors and families affected, as well as the first responders and rescue workers called to duty." And as a mark of respect, the Welsh Guards played the Star-Spangled Banner at Windsor Castle. Carl Dinnan, ITV News.
The Mayor of London has said hate will never win as Londoners marked the 20th anniversary of 9/11. An event took place at the Olympic Park in Stratford, and there was a private ceremony for victims' families at the September the 11th Memorial Garden in Grosvenor Square. In a statement, Sadiq Khan said, "Our values of freedom, tolerance and respect will always prevail."